What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is the first non-podcast video I've posted in a while now. And as you can tell by the title of the video, that's just because I have been really busy the last year and a half or so. And so I haven't had time to put out really high quality YouTube videos. In that same vein, this video is going to be focused on just the key information you need to know. I'm going to share some figures and some B-roll, but it's not going to be super edited like you might see on other YouTube videos. I really just wanted to get you the info in a easy to digest way as fast as possible. If I was going to make a super edited video, it wouldn't come out. I just don't have time for that right now. So in that spirit, let's just get right into the video. I do have this in a blog post format. So if you'd like to read that instead, I'll put that in the description. You can click through that. Sometimes I like to read things versus view things. Obviously, I appreciate the YouTube view time because that helps me reach more people. But I understand that I'm just here to help you in any way I can. And the blog post sometimes is more digestible and faster for other people. Additionally, this blog post and YouTube video is supplemental to an email that I sent out this week on YouTube. And so if you want to see that, if you want to get on the email list or not on the email list, definitely there's a link in the description. I'll put that there. You can click through that and join the email list. Absolutely no obligation. You can unsubscribe at any time, but I do put out a lot of good information weekly on there. So definitely don't miss out. And if you're here from the newsletter, welcome, and let's get right into the video. So right now it's February 2025, and this all started a year ago, really in February 2024, January, February timeframe. I was really burnt out. I was pushing a lot of business growth. I have my young son, my family was growing. I was transitioning to a new day job because I do still have a 9 to 5, growing my coaching business, and I was just feeling really overwhelmed and burnt out. I was missing workouts left and right. There were some weeks where I didn't train at all, and I was feeling really overwhelmed. My athletes were seeing really good progress, but I really didn't have anything left personally. And it made me feel like an imposter. I was telling myself over and over again, how the fuck can I even call myself a coach if I can't work out myself? Luckily, my coaching was good. My athletes were seeing good results. And so that was nice, but I really didn't feel like I was walking the walk and I didn't know how to get out of the hole I was in. And through working with athletes, I find that a lot of people feel this way, which is really why I wanted to share this video with the tips that I use to get out of that hole and, what I've done this last year and how you can do it as well. So in that February 2024 timeframe, I felt really defeated. And then this last year, I have just finished an ultramarathon training block in which I didn't quite finish the ultramarathon due to a foot injury, but I did pass the marathon distance. I did 28.5 miles roughly. And during that ultramarathon block, I also set my all-time bench PR at 315 pounds bench PR. And like I said, that was in the middle of an ultramarathon training block in the middle of the busiest period of my life. And so that's really why I wanted to show you how I did all of that today. So as I started to reevaluate things last year, the first thing I realized is some of the advice I give to a lot of my athletes is that done is better than perfect. I used to live by this motto of anything in life worth doing is worth overdoing. And that worked really well for me when I didn't have a lot of responsibilities. But, you throw on a young kid, a 9 to 5, coaching, growing a coaching business, doing college, getting ready to put into my master's. When life gets busy, that's when our systems really get put to the test. And clearly my system wasn't working. It wasn't until I was talking with another coach that I really adapted that phrase from anything in life worth doing is worth overdoing to anything in life worth doing is worth doing partially, which really means that if it's worth doing, if it's worth completing the whole thing, and it's impossible for you to do that due to schedule or whatever, it's still worth doing part of it. And that really shifted my thinking. I was really caring so much about training and fitting it into my schedule and doing it perfectly that I was missing training altogether rather than not doing it. So I would push it off till later in the day when I felt I'd have more energy and be able to put more effort into it. And then that time of the day would come, I would still be busy or mentally or emotionally exhausted. And then I would just miss the workout. And so in this way, I realized that the perfectionism that I had around my workouts was holding me back from seeing all that progress. So around March timeframe, I decided that I was going to work out every single day, even if it was only 10 or 15 minutes, the first 1 or 2 exercises. As a result, in the busiest year of my life, really, I actually did more training because I was able to go in some days and do the first 1 or 2 exercises and then dip out and finish the rest of my day and call that a win for the day rather than miss the session altogether. Once you get started and get this momentum going, you're more likely to continue on the workout. Getting started is the hardest part. But again, even if you don't finish your workout, you're still doing more than you would have done otherwise. And as we're going to discuss shortly, you're probably going to be getting enough stimulus to even make progress. So in this way, in busy periods of life, by committing to the smallest amount of training that you can manage mentally and emotionally and time-wise, you're actually going to allow yourself to do more training than you would have done otherwise. Secondly, this is where we're going to get into some figures. You really don't need to do much to get stronger. In a 2024 meta-regression, which is a meta-analysis of a lot of different studies, Pelland et al., they analyzed 67 studies, and I'll throw some figures up in a minute, with 2,058 participants, and they were looking at the relationship between frequency of training and volume per muscle group with strength and hypertrophy gains. So hypertrophy being adding more muscle, for those of you that don't know. One of the things about studies is you can find a study that supports pretty much any viewpoint. And so you really want to wait until there is a good body of studies showing the same thing or similar results to then draw a conclusion. And so what a meta-analysis does is it looks through, in this case, 67 studies, and they take all of the data from those studies and they statistically analyze it all in groups, in a big group or multiple, maybe subgroups, depending on how they do the analysis. And in that way, they're able to identify trends across studies, this across 67 studies with over 2,000 participants, to actually draw really good conclusions as to the relationship between things. So here we're looking at volume specifically and strength and hypertrophy gains. So I'll put this table up here. As you can see, this table is from the study. Even one fractional set per muscle group per week showed detectable strength gains across all these studies. Now, a fractional set was defined as any set that worked the muscle, whether it was the prime mover or not. And so what that means is bicep curl, the bicep would be the prime mover, but then a bent over row, the bicep curl would also be worked in that movement. It just wouldn't be the prime mover. And so that would also count towards their fractional weekly sets. Now, this is exactly how I hit my all-time bench PR while I was doing that ultramarathon training in the busiest period of my life. I didn't read the study at the time, but anecdotally, this study showed exactly what I was implementing. And so when I read the study, it was more of a confirmation of what I had done and why what I had done worked. When time was limited, I committed myself to just getting in the gym and doing the first 1 to 2 exercises for the day, 1 to 2 lifts for the day. And because of the way I program my training, those first 1 to 2 lifts for the day tend to be the heavy compound lifts due to how I structure the workout. And that meant by doing the first 1 to 2 exercises, I could get pretty much all the strength adaptation I really needed, or at least the minimum effective dose. And then I could get out and get on with my day. So focusing on 2 to 3 heavy sets per movement per week, that enabled me to keep my strength, set my all-time bench PR, and not burn out while I was doing it. All right, so gaining strength is great, but what if you want to gain muscle? If you know anything about gaining muscle, you know it's going to require more volume than gaining strength, but it might not be as much as you think. In that earlier study, Pelland et al. Found that detectable hypertrophy was seen with just 4 fractional sets per week. Again, a fractional set was defined as any set that worked the muscle, whether it was the prime mover or not. And if you look at the table, even the higher efficiency tier of hypertrophy training was only 5 to 10 fractional sets per week. And then after that 5 to 10 fractional sets per week, the efficiency did start to decline. So what this means, if you look at the table, is that you could gain muscle on just 2 to 3 main sets for a muscle, and then 2 to 3 accessory sets per muscle per week. And even if you wanted to be more effective, you could do 3 to 4 sets per muscle group per week and 4 to 5 accessory movements per muscle per week and see considerable hypertrophy, assuming that you are eating enough, you're eating in a slight calorie surplus, you're taking your sets close to failure, and you're sleeping enough to get all of the recovery and gains that you need. So what this could mean is you could do as little as 2 to 3 sets of direct bicep work, using the bicep as an example. So you could do 2 to 3 sets of curls, and then you could do 2 to 3 sets of an exercise that also works the bicep, like I said earlier, like a bent over row or a low cable row. And that would be enough to elicit a hypertrophy response. Taking that same bicep example and aiming for the higher efficiency tier, you could just do 3 to 4 sets of a curl variation that take you close-ish to failure, and then accumulate 4 to 5 sets of an exercise that also works the bicep, like the bent over row. Now, important to note, this is over the entire week, not just per session. So you could spread this out over the week, however works for you. Also, importantly to note that these accessory movements, they're going to work multiple muscles. So your 4 to 5 sets of bent over rows are contributing to the fractional weekly sets, not only for your biceps, but also your lats, your traps, and your grip if you're not using straps. So an accessory movement could contribute to multiple different muscle groups. So you might not need as many accessory movements as you would initially think. So you can see how we can cut back on volume and time in the gym per week, and we can still see good progress in strength and hypertrophy on relatively low weekly volumes. Now the question becomes, what about running? Unfortunately, running doesn't show the same relatively small dose-reward relationship as lifting does. The best runners in the world tend to be the ones that accumulate the most running volume over their lifetimes and obviously are genetically predisposed to being good runners. but that really holds true. You're going to be a better runner generally the more volume that you can accumulate. And that goes for other cardio methods as well, like swimming and cycling. For my ultra specifically, I peaked at a 5-hour long run, which was during a very busy period of life. It took a lot of planning and pre-work to free up that much time on the weekend, but a 5-hour long run is a long run to do. It's a lot of time. The good news is, if you've got shorter race goals, you want to run 5K, 10K, half marathon, or if you just simply want to be as healthy as possible aerobically, you're going to need a lot less volume than I did for my ultra, or somebody else might need for their 100 mile or something like that. Ultimately, the amount of time you're going to need to dedicate to running is going to depend on your specific goals, whether it's a race or just being healthy, and what modality you're working. That said, I do have some tips that you can use to make running more doable with a busy schedule based on the stuff that I have learned over the last almost 2 years since my son's been born. Firstly, you can implement 1 to 2 speed sessions per week to get the maximum amount of gains with the time you have. So if you're short on time, but you've got the mental and emotional energy to go out for a hard track session or hard road, sprint session, this is going to be a great way to get as much adaptation as possible in little time. You just have to be careful not to overdo it and injure yourself, because higher intensity training is going to have higher recovery demands as well. The reason I'm recommending this is anecdotally what I use with athletes, what I've learned myself, but also a recent study by McInnes et al. Showed that when volume is equated, high intensity interval training may provide more adaptations per time spent than easier running. Now, this doesn't mean all your training should be high intensity interval training, as all intensities have their place. And again, high intensity interval training, speed work has a high recovery demand, so you can't do it all the time anyways. But this is a strategy you could use to save some time if you're not currently doing a lot of speed work. Secondly, and the counterpoint to point number 1, is you can pull back on all speed work and just do zone 2 runs or easy conversational pace runs. If you're the type of person who has some time to go on some longer runs, but you're really limited on mental and emotional energy to do hard workouts, this can be a great way to get training in and use it as a time to de-stress. This is kind of how I was for certain periods, especially my ultra prep. I had a little bit more time, but my mental and emotional well was pretty drained. And so going out for a speed session felt really overwhelming, whereas I could go out for an easy 30, sometimes even 60-minute run without too much stress, and that would actually act as a time to de-stress. While the study I referenced above showed that high-intensity interval training may provide more underlying adaptations per time spent, zone 2 training, conversational pace training, is going to give you a lot of underlying adaptations. And if you can do more volume by pulling back on all speed work, that's even better. Because as I said before, the people who can accumulate the most volume are going to be the people that are generally better runners over their lifetime. The third tip is to cross-train. If you truly don't have time to do all the running you need to do, you can cross-train or even multitask. An indoor bike trainer is perfect to get aerobic work in while reading, doing work on the computer, depending on your setup, or something else. I didn't use this technique during my ultramarathon block, but I have used this technique before when in the triathlon training block. I actually did the bulk of my studying for the CSCS on my indoor bike trainer. As you can see here in the picture, I would set my textbook up, do my bike sessions, read the textbook, and make flashcards on my phone on Quizlet. And that was how I did most of my studying because, again, time limited, got to make do with what you have. And lastly, the last tip I have here is to save time with strength training and use that time to run. So if you're able to pull overall strength volume back and still make strength progress like we just discussed earlier, you're going to now have a lot more time to put towards running. And so you can create more time for this cardio work by making your strength training a lot more efficient. At the end of the day, training with a busy schedule is all about pre-planning and optimizing where you can. Your training program is never going to be as optimal as someone who has nothing to do but train and play video games, but that doesn't mean you can't make enough progress to be above average. As you can see, with the busiest period of my life, working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, sometimes across everything, I was still able to run farther than a marathon, which is definitely above average, and bench 315 pounds, which is a big milestone for a lot of people. If I was to compare myself to powerlifters only or to professional runners, I would feel pretty weak and pretty slow and like I can't run that far. But both of those are well above average for most humans and a lot of even very serious athletes. So by implementing good training principles, optimizing the time you do have available and focusing on long-term progress, you can set up your training in a way that's going to allow you to make a lot of progress, be well above average in strength and endurance, and do it all without burning out or giving up on the other important things in your life. Hope you guys got some value out of this video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'm working on doing a little bit more videos, even if they're not as highly produced as some of the other videos here on YouTube. That way I can get you guys all the great information that you need to make progress in your training based on what I'm seeing with athletes, the research I'm reviewing, and what I'm learning myself. If you guys did enjoy the video, I would appreciate a like to let me know that you enjoyed the video. Let YouTube know you enjoyed it and pushes it out to more people. That way we can help as many people as possible, as that's why I do all of this stuff. And if you want to see more videos like this and get notified of all future videos, subscribe, hit the notification icon. That way you get notified when a new video comes out and you can get all this information as fast as possible. Thanks for watching the video, and I will see you guys soon.